evening from New York. I'm Selwyn Collins, your host of CWS Journeys. Welcome to another edition of CWS. Those of you who are joining us for the first time, a very special thank you. Son of our soil, a gem of our soil, I would say, Dr. Ivelaw Griffith is our guest this evening. But before I bring him on, I just want to read a little bit of his bio. Dr. Ivelaw Lloyd Griffith is executive in residence at the University at Albany, State University of New York. He also is associate at Manchester Trade International Business Advisors and senior fellow of the American Association of State Colleges and Universities, both in Washington, D.C. He served as the 9th president of Fort Valley State University in Georgia from July 2013 to June 2015. There he led the right sizing of the educational and economic enterprise, focusing on growth enrollment, enhancing the academic profile, improving community and corporate linkages, controlling expenditure, launching an honors program and an undergraduate research program, and initiating a feasibility study to establish a school of entrepreneurship and business innovation. Dr. Griffith holds a Bachelor of Social Sciences with distinction in political science from the University of Guyana, a Master of Arts in Political Science and Public Administration from Long Island University, New York, and both a Master of Philosophy and a PhD in Political Science from the City University of New York Graduate School. He also graduated from Harvard Graduate School of Education's program in Educational Leadership. Dr. Griffith, welcome to CWS Journeys.
Delighted to be here, Selwyn. Delighted to be here.
Dr. Griffith, beyond the awards and the accolades and titles, what is the closest some have come to describing you?
Some people say I'm a workaholic. Some people say I'm impatient. Some people say I like this guy Aristotle. And the people who say all those three things, they're correct.
What is it about Aristotle you like, Dr. Griffith?
If you were to go to Florida International University, if you were to go to Fort Valley State, and if you were to go to York College and Radford University, the places that I've been over the last few decades, you'll find some place on campus, a simple proposition by Aristotle that I think is important for each of us in whatever field of endeavor we're in to embrace. And it's a simple line that says, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. What Aristotle was telling us, and what I like to embrace and propose and to practice, is not being comfortable with mediocrity. But not only not being comfortable with mediocrity, but being a practitioner of habituating good practices. When Aristotle said it's not an act, it's not a one-time thing, it's a habit. You've got to repeat. And the value added of being a proponent or a practitioner of Aristotle is that, and I said this to students and professors wherever I had an opportunity to serve, you've got to embrace it in a holistic way. Can't want, if you're a son who is a student, to be a great student but a lousy son, in the sense that you don't call mom or dad for weeks, only if you want something. You can't want to be a practitioner of Aristotle in that sense, and if you're a son who's a student who's an athlete, want to be practicing and pursuing excellence at the gate but not in your classroom. You've got to embrace the pursuit of habituation of excellence on a continual basis. And so that aspect of me is true. I'm also, maybe it's a function of knowing so much of what we can do, we need to do on a fairly urgent basis, and I'm usually impatient to get things done.
Can you take us back to and give us a glimpse of Ivelaw Griffith growing up at the ages of 9 and 16?
9 and 16, I was deeply engaged. Let's take 9 first. as a product of an experience in Guyana that is not unique to Guyana. It is not unique to the Caribbean. It is also reflective of these United States. There was a wonderful book written in 1954 by a Jamaican anthropologist called Edith Clarke. And she talked about my mother who fathered me. What she was talking about is single parenting households where mothers or grandmothers are raising kids. And so at age 9, I was a reflection of what Edith Clarke talked about. And so many of us in Guyana and the Caribbean, United States, where you're being raised by grandparents. And so that was the 9-year Ivelaw Griffith. At the 16, I was in high school and I was focused on being the best possible student. And I think part of the anxiety and the determination to be the best possible student was because in looking around my environment, I saw the necessity to move away and move out and move up. And so in some respects, and this is true for all of us, who you become is a function of where you're at a particular point in time, and any role modeling and pursuit of excellence that you may see in your community or elsewhere.
I'm curious about your grandmother. Introduce us to this woman who has made such an impact in your life.
You know, the reality of the Caribbean that was being a significant point of conversation for the last 12, 15 years. As Guyanese left our native land and went to Trinidad, and went to Barbados, and went to St. Lucia, went almost every place that it can go. That reality of Guyanese moving out, there was a reverse of that in the 1920s and 30s. Remember the 1920s and 30s in the aftermath of the Depression, when so many of the colonies were in deep economic and social stress. Many citizens of the colonies left one part of the colony, one colony, and went to others. And my grandparents left the Eastern Caribbean. St. Lucia in the case of my grandmother, Barbados in the case of my grandfather, and went as thousands of other folk from what were then called the small islands, went to Guyana to look for work, to look for opportunity, to look for betterment. And so that grandmother is a product of the circumstances of looking elsewhere for an opportunity for betterment, and Guyana became that elsewhere.
Dr. Griffith, when you think of Guyana and being Guyanese, what comes to mind?
3 things come to mind. Wonderful natural resources, bounteous opportunities, and I'm going to leave for the moment the petroleum reserves that now have been proven to be there. But what also comes to mind is a sorrowful, regretful reflection of the fact that in spite of all the natural resources, in spite of all the wealth, the political vicissitudes Guyana face internally and externally, and I'll come back to the combination, the connectivity between the two. Those political vicissitudes have allowed Guyanese not to be beneficiaries in a wholesome way of the wonderful natural resources, of the wonderful opportunities that are there. And so kind of a sorrowful, regretfulness come to mind. But the third thing that also comes to mind is hopefulness. And hopefulness partly because of the resources that are there, and hopefulness in particular because there is a new political dispensation which, and it's not only Ivelaw Griffith and Guyanese in the diaspora in North America, Guyanese across the diaspora, whether you're in North America, Europe, the Caribbean, in Asia, see an opportunity not to be ashamed of the nation from which they came. see an opportunity to help to make a new path, either by enabling whatever talent or time or treasure you have, enabling the society to realize those great bounteous potentials, or encouraging non-Guyanese who may have the investment capital to do it. And so those are the three elements, aspects that come to mind when I think of my native land.
You're an educator, among other things. When did this journey in education begin for you, or as an educator begin for you?
The journey actually began when I was a student at UG. And as a student at UG, you also have at least in those days, in the 1970s, you had an opportunity to tutor. And I felt a passion, saw that I can be good at it. And once I graduated in 1980, having been the first graduate to graduate with distinction in political science from the university, I was given the opportunity to teach as well. And so that passion for teaching, that desire to give back as an opportunity to do some of the things which I saw some of my wonderful professors do, create excitement, create discovery opportunities, push the envelope on inquiry, push the envelope on what is and what might not be. I think the genesis of that goes back to the 70s at the University of Guyana.
What is it about teaching? What is it about a student understanding you? What is it about that process that really excites you, that really pulls you in?
I'll give you two examples as a way of helping to articulate what for me is the fulcrum around which the passion for teaching revolves. In the 80s, 1980s, I was teaching at Hunter College while I was doing my PhD. And one of the courses that I taught regularly was a course called Third World Politics. And whether it was Third World Politics or world politics or Caribbean or Central American or even American foreign policy, I found it as a useful device to, among the assignments I would give, is to give a country assessment assignment. And I would randomly pick countries around the world, just assign their number of parameters for the assignment. And I had a student who I assigned the country Djibouti. Came to me afterward and said, "Professor Griffith, can I change it?" I said, "No. You've got to take your assignment." He called me a couple of names, but he only told me that afterwards, of course. He did the assignment, and the following semester he came back to thank me. Let me tell you how he came back to thank me. He was mad at me initially for giving him a country he had never heard about. And this is a gentleman who was about twice my age. He figured that if he had never heard of Djibouti, it couldn't be important. But having obligated him to study the country, he fell in love with Djibouti. And he went there on vacation. And he brought me the evidence with an apology. He came to apologize and say, "Professor Griffith, I'm so glad you forced me to go beyond my arrogance. Because having had a chance, having been forced to study Djibouti, I fell in love with the country." And he went there on vacation, brought back the price of the ticket he and his girlfriend paid, and he showed me the mosquito bites that also was part of the evidence. And that for me, that story that goes back to I think 1986 or 87, is part of the pleasure. And we, each of us as a student, also had those moments. You know, why is he giving me this assignment? You know, why am I having to study this? I remember in high school, why do I have to study Latin? We had 2 years of Latin in high school, but you're so caught up in what you think you know and what is not relevant or important that sometimes you need to be enabled as a student to go beyond your boundaries of knowledge. And that's one thing. So having someone come a year, semester, years afterwards to say thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you for forcing me to go beyond the boundaries of my own willingness to learn. I'll give you another story. When I was Dean of the Honors College of Florida International, I taught regularly about two seminars while I was Dean, one PhD seminar and one honors seminar. And I had a student, and I'm not going to call his name, he's a big-time attorney now in Tampa, one of my best students. After he graduated, stayed in touch. I helped him to get an internship at the State Department. He had a wonderful time in Trinidad. And he went to law school at Georgetown. We stayed in touch. When he was finished law school and he went back to Florida, one day he called me to say, Dr. G, I'm getting married, but I want to set the dates around your availability. You have got to be at this wedding. So I gave him some dates, and so my wife and I went to Florida, Clearwater, Florida, for this wedding. In the church, this ex-student of mine, his father is escorting him up the aisle, and his father nods to me. Now, I had never met the father, and so I nodded back, and general friendliness. Wedding went wonderfully. After reception, the father came to me at the reception to introduce himself. Father said, Dr. G, you don't know me, but I am X's father. And I'm so delighted that you are able to come to this wedding because X has two idols, and I am not one of the two. He said, you and Colin Powell are the two idols of this X. Now, it gets better. A couple of weeks went by. X calls me. He said, Dr. G, guess where we're going for honeymoon? I said, X, I don't want to guess. Tell me. He said, we're going to Belize. Remember you made me study Belize in that seminar? I fell in love with Belize and I convinced X, Y. Yes. X convinced Y, his now bride, that they should go to Belize. It's things like that where years after, something that you introduce a student to will have such an impact on his knowledge base, his pursuit of a journey, of his discovery of a life, that he connects elements of that life going forward to some experience that you had something to do with in the classroom. And I can recount many other episodes, many other stories, but those are the things, among others, that make you don't teach. Teachers don't get a whole lot of money, but you don't teach whether high school, middle school, or college just for the money.
So take us to July 22nd, 2014. You assumed your post as the ninth president of Fort Valley State University. As you sat in your chair for the first time, what's going through your thoughts? What are the thoughts that are going through your mind?
I moved to Fort Valley in July 2013, not 14.
2013.
Several things. Here's an opportunity at a very challenged institution to help to make a difference. Here is an opportunity for someone who had not gone to an HBCU, who had not been a teacher or a provost or a dean at an HBCU, to make a contribution. And so it was an opportunity to enter some new terrain, to make a difference. I can tell you that the 2 years I spent there, I had an opportunity to make a difference in a variety of respects. And we're going to come back at another time, I promise you, another program to talk a little bit more about higher education in Fort Valley and SUNY. But I am comforted that in spite of the brevity of my leadership there, I was able to make a difference in setting a path for the university to manage its challenges. I was showing a good friend of mine, Captain Jerry Govaya. He was up here a couple of weeks ago. and I had a little, what I call a sorrel lime at the house in Freeport. And I was showing him a graphic which I've begun to use about change. It's a graphic where the preacher says to this congregation, "Who wants change?" Every member of the audience puts his and her hands up. And then he says, "Who wants to change?" Nobody puts their hands up. Many people want change, but they themselves don't want to actually change. And one of my experiences at Fort Valley is precisely that. In order for the institution to be solidified and set on a foundation for the future, change had to be made in a variety of respects. But people embracing the change is not always an easy thing to happen. We'll come back another time when we talk about Fort Valley.
Yes, good. Awesome.